Hello, you're watching Middle East Matters on France 24. I'm Nadia Massi. Here's what's coming up this week in the show. Hostages freed from Gaza recount their ordeal in detention. We'll hear why Hamas is still holding Israeli men. Also, incarcerated Palestinians freed, among them teenagers charged with stone throwing. More on their detention during the show. And amid the truce, Palestinians tentatively return to the north of Gaza to see what remains of their homes. Welcome to the programme. This week, we are starting to learn about the conditions of the hostages held in Gaza. Those released tell different stories. Some received medical attention, others were denied it. Many were held in darkness with little food. What is clear is that all hostages endured a huge ordeal. With more details of their captivity, here's our first report.
The hostages freed in recent days survived 7 weeks of captivity and bombing in Gaza. Details of the conditions they were detained in are beginning to emerge. The nephew of Adina Moshe, 72, says his aunt was kept in darkness the whole time.
She had to adjust to the sunlight. She was walking with her eyes down because she was in a tunnel. She was not used to the daylight.
Yocheved Lifshitz, 85, was released a month ago before the current exchanges. She said she was not kept in a tunnel. Some detainees slept on mats, others on plastic chairs. They had to knock on a door to ask to go to the toilet. Some families were separated while others were kept together, while meals were irregular.
There were days that they didn't get food, only pita bread.
13-year-old Hila said that her captors told her to always talk in a whisper. Some captives, such as these Thai farm workers, say they were not tortured or assaulted during their detention. Certain detainees received medical treatment like this young woman, but Alma Avraham, 84, who was freed on Sunday, is in a critical state.
לאמא שלי לא הגיע לחזור ככה. אמא שלי הוזנחה מבחינה רפואית בצורה קשה. זאת הייתה הזנחה במשך כל תקופת השהייה שלה שם.
Some hostages remained cut off completely from the world, while others learned of their loved ones' deaths on radios given to them by their captors.
Well, pressure is now mounting on Hamas to release more Israelis. So far, it's opting to release women and children and keep men. With a look at why, here's our terrorism expert Wassim Nasr, who I spoke to earlier.
They released only elderly and women and children, meaning this kind of population or people are the hardest to be kept captive by the Hamas, if we talk about logistics, simply, and without talking about the human value, they have the lowest bargaining value towards Israel. And from the side of Israel, it is almost the same category of people that are being released, meaning youngsters who are detained by Israel and those who are accused or committed acts against Israelis either in the West Bank or Jerusalem. So Hamas succeeded in pushing the age of release to 19, being those who are released can be 19 today, but solely for people from the side of Israel who committed acts and attacks but didn't kill anyone, because from the side of Israel, those people have also the lowest bargaining value, but also their release can be justified politically and towards the military, without forgetting that the last bargain, those bargains today are 1 for 3, meaning 1 from Hamas and 3 from the Israeli side, knowing that the prior negotiations, it was 1 for 1,000, meaning the deal that profited to Yahya Sinwar himself, he was released among more than 1,000 Palestinian detainee in exchange of a French-Israeli national, Gilad Shalit, at the time.
But many more people are still being held, both, of course, in Israeli prisons and hostages in Gaza. And it's worth saying, when it comes to Gaza, those that are being held some of them are being held by Hamas, but others are being held by groups like Islamic Jihad, for example.
Exactly. You have to remember that, of course, some of them are detained by Hamas and were captive by Hamas from the first hours. But the first who spoke about hostages, it was the Islamic Jihad. And in the first speech they made, they said, we have 30 hostages and maybe more, because people were getting hostages and giving them to the Islamic Jihad or to Hamas, knowing that they won on the 7th of October. More than 10 Palestinian factions entered Israel, and evil civilians abducted some of the hostages today. And this is why Qatar is saying you have to make the truth a little bit longer in order to give space for Hamas to gather hostages, or at least to know all of the hostages, where are they today inside the Gaza Strip, knowing that the military pressure makes it very hard for the Hamas administration to know exactly where each and every hostage is.
Wassim Nasr for us there. Well, let's get some more then on the Palestinians being released from Israeli jails. Many are teenagers charged with offences including stone throwing. Others had been convicted on terrorism charges in military courts, where conviction rates for Palestinians are extremely high. Catherine Viette tells us more.
A tearful reunion for the family of Mohammed Abu al-Hamas. They're celebrating the teenager's release from an Israeli prison. He's one of around 150 Palestinians who have been freed as part of a deal made between Hamas and Israel to exchange hostages for prisoners.
I can't describe my emotions. It's an indescribable joy. I'm very happy. I hope that others will soon be released from Israeli prisons, my friends, my cousins.
While those that have been released are happy to have their freedom back, many have described deplorable treatment while incarcerated.
They hit me on the legs and hands, and my finger is broken. They gassed us and told us we'd be sorry. They beat the girls. They came in every day and stopped us from eating. Their policy was to starve us, make us thirsty, and hit us.
And the former prisoners say the conditions only got worse after Hamas's deadly attack on October 7th.
They took out the cookers, the TV, and the radios. All communications were removed. We were isolated. They only gave us one portion of food for 7 or 8 detainees. We were always hungry.
According to Palestinian officials, a quarter of the West Bank population has spent time in an Israeli prison. Israeli NGO Ha-Moked says more than 6,700 Palestinians are currently locked up. 2,300 are convicted, 2,300 awaiting trial, and more than 2,000 in administrative detention. The charges range from stone throwing and carrying knives to violent attacks on Israelis and murder, and many Palestinians see the mass jailings as a tool of the occupation. There is also little faith in the justice system overseen by Israel's military courts. In some years, they've handed down guilty verdicts 99% of the time. But the most contentious issue is Israel's extensive use of administrative detention, in which Palestinians are indefinitely detained without any charges or trials. The Israeli government says such a measure is necessary on security grounds, but critics say it violates due process, and there have been calls for Israel to abolish the practice.
Well, at the beginning of the programme, we looked at the conditions for hostages in Gaza. And of course, for the millions of Palestinians trapped in the enclave, living conditions are dire. Food and drinking water are in short supply, and the healthcare system has collapsed, particularly in the north, where no hospitals are currently functioning. During this truce, some Palestinians, though, have been returning to their neighbourhoods in the north and have found little remaining.
Displaced families walked aimlessly along a muddy and desolate landscape. Behind them, Israeli tanks patrolled the rubble in what was left of Gaza City. Bombs may have stopped raining on the Palestinian enclave in recent days, but for these civilians, the nightmare continues.
There's nothing left in the north. It's become a giant plain. Nobody knows where their house is. We don't know what happened to us. We became refugees overnight.
All along the Gaza Strip, collapsed buildings and piles of debris stood witness to the destruction caused by Israel's 50-day war on Hamas. In Gaza City, injured patients flocked to one of the last clinics still providing medical care. And in refugee camps, heavy rain compounded the misery of shell-shocked families already living in squalid conditions. In the northern town of Jabalia, which was heavily shelled by the IDF, residents queued in the pouring rain to fill up plastic containers at one of the city's last remaining water pumps.
Now more than 50% of the usable water wells have been destroyed. This is causing a major crisis, especially on the fourth day of the truce, and we have not obtained any fuel to operate these wells.
Meanwhile, hundreds of trucks carrying fuel, food and other supplies continued to come in from Egypt through the southern Rafah crossing. But humanitarian actors warned the current aid would need to at least double in order to meet the basic needs of Gaza's population.
Well, there's, of course, plenty more coverage of the situation in Gaza and in Israel coming up on France 24. For the programme, that's it, though. Thanks for watching.